When someone's property gets damaged, how do you figure out what's fair? We're going to talk about that today in Exodus chapter 22. Hey guys, and welcome back to God's Word Made Simple by Simple Servant Ministries. My name is Aaron Hawk, and if this is your first time visiting with us, I just want to say welcome and thank you for joining us today. God's Word Made Simple is an online discipleship ministry dedicated to taking God's Word and making it simple. We want to help you understand God's Word, apply it to your life, and grow in your relationship with the Lord. Also, if you appreciate this ministry and content, at some point make sure and hit that subscribe button, turn that bell notification to all so you don't miss any future videos. We would love to have you as part of our family. Okay guys, welcome back. So today we are jumping into Exodus chapter 22 and we're doing verses 1 through 15. This is primarily around property rights, what happens with property. And again, this is all in the context of the ancient nation of Israel, and all of these things that I'm reading really fit into the Ten Commandments. So last time we talked about kidnapping, and I could have pointed out that that is stealing, right? Kidnapping is stealing a person. Well, each of the laws that are here are really just fleshing out the Ten Commandments. And by the way, check out my video on the Ten Commandments. So we're going to jump straight in. If you didn't catch last week's video, I don't remember if I already said it or not, but if so, then the editor will cut this out. And if not, then there you go. You've got me pointing in the video from last week would pop up, assuming you're on a platform that allows that anyway. Otherwise, we'll put it in the description. So, chapter 22, we're talking about property rights, and we just finished a discussion on when animals fight, so that's kind of related and transitioning into this section. So if a man steals an ox or a sheep and slaughters it or sells it, he shall pay 5 oxen for the ox and 4 sheep for the sheep. So there's reasons I'm not going to get into for why the amount is different. It's not 5 and 5, it's 5 and 4. Not worth getting into all of that. But the point is, there is a multiplier applied to the stolen animal. So someone steals something, well, they were just trying to eat. Well, that's not a good enough excuse. It's not your property. That's something that people struggle with in the modern day, but really that's always been the case. Thieves always say, well, I was just trying to fill in the blank. Bottom line, if it's not yours, you have no right to it. And in God's law in ancient Israel, you had to pay a multiplier. So in the modern day, somebody steals from you, you can sue them and you may get more than whatever. That's, once again, where this is based. And also remember that people's cattle, whether an ox or sheep, is part of their livelihood too. It's not just a pet. This is part of how they support their family. So it's a lot more than just an animal to them. It's also how they make their living, in other words. If the thief is caught while breaking in and struck so that he dies, there will be no blood guiltiness on his account. So in the modern day, if somebody's trying to steal from you and there's a question in modern law, if somebody is stealing from you and you shoot them or stab them or in some other manner kill them, there's a question as to whether or not that is justified under law. Some places have what's known as castle doctrine and no duty to retreat, meaning if someone breaks into your home, it is assumed that they intend to do you harm, not simply to steal your stuff. Other places say, well, you have no right to protect your home and you do have a duty to retreat. So unless you can prove that you were trapped beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a whole other thing in the legal system, then you would be guilty of murder for defending your home and property. Well, that's what this is talking about here. So this would actually support the idea of castle doctrine and no duty to retreat. And granted, it's more complicated than this. I'm using modern to help you understand ancient here. But the idea is that this is someone who has broken in and it is assumed that they intend to do you harm. And you see that because in verse 3 it says, "But if the sun has risen on him, there will be blood guiltiness on his account. He shall surely make restitution. If he owes nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. If what he stole is actually found alive in his possession, whether an ox or a donkey or a sheep, he shall pay double." So, in other words, in the middle of the night, somebody's prowling through your house. And please also bear in mind, this was before security systems and flashlights and thermal goggles if somebody's doing that in their home. Somebody's moving around in your house in the middle of the night. You have no way to know what their intentions are, and you have no way to see whether or not they're armed and what they plan to do with that potential weapon. But if it's sunlight and you can see that they're only stealing, then there's a difference made here in the law. But if the sun has risen on him, there will be blood guiltiness on his account. So the assumption is that once the sun rises, you can see whether or not the person is intending to do you harm. Now, this is God's law in ancient Israel. Modern law does not perfectly reflect this, and it's a different culture too. So it's not fair to expect the two laws to line up perfectly because it's a different time and a different culture. The original example, as I said, was just to kind of help you understand the first part. But the idea here is if it's obvious the person is just stealing, you catch somebody in your house, and by the way, if it was proven that this was the case, even in modern law, the following example would apply. But let's say you just catch them in your refrigerator. Do you have a right to just put a bullet in their head? Well, modern law generally, even in a castle doctrine, no duty retreat place, if it's in the middle of the day especially, most of the time, if it was demonstrated that that's what happened, you'd go to jail for murder. That's what verse 3 is saying. But if the person broke in, was armed, and posed an imminent threat to you, that would fall under a different section of law in ancient Israel. And in the modern day, that's where the castle doctrine, no duty to retreat, would kick in. So in other words, if it's unknown, it's assumed in the middle of the night somebody intends to do you harm because you have no way to know otherwise. If you have a way to know otherwise and all they're doing is stealing, that stuff is not worth their life. But if they intend to do you harm, then you have a right to defend yourself. That's essentially what this section is saying. And then it says, and then if what the person stole is found in his possession, then they shall pay double for whatever they stole. All right, and again, the fundamental difference here in verse 4 is that the person still had the property, therefore it's double. Verse 1, the person had already sold the property. So, and probably a few reasons for that, but at the very least, I think it's because it takes time to restore, like with an animal. Either you have to raise an animal again, which takes time, or it takes time to buy the appropriate animal. So I think that's why there's the difference in the amount, but that's a different video for a much more in-depth study. If a man lets a field or vineyard be grazed bare, and lets his animal loose so that it grazes in another man's field, he shall make restitution from the best of his own field and the best of his own vineyard. So the point here is if you are allowing the animals to take things all the way down to the ground in your own property, but you're letting your animals loose and destroying the ability for other people to grow crops, then you need to restore to them the ability to grow food. Again, should be common sense. It's a theme here with this. Verse 6, if a fire breaks out and spreads to thorn bushes so that stacked grain or the standing grain or the field itself is consumed, he who started the fire shall surely make restitution. So, in other words, if you have destroyed, in this case, stacked grain or stacked what did it say? Standing grain. So stuff that is ready to be harvested or already harvested, or the field itself. Again, this is the ability for this person to support their family, both directly through the ability to eat, but also through their ability to sell that grain. So if you have ruined their livelihood, you have to make it right. Again, we see much of this in Western law. If a man gives his neighbor money or goods to keep for him, so, hey, either letting them borrow or you have entrusted it to them for safekeeping. If a man gives his neighbor money or goods to keep for him, and it is stolen from the man's house, if the thief is caught, he shall pay double. So, pretty simple, just like last time, the thief is caught, the stuff is still in his possession, you pay double, whatever. So in other words, the same law applies if like, let's say I had oxen, you needed oxen to go plow your field, and I say, hey, you can take my oxen and go plow your field, and then the thief steals them. Thief gets caught, still has the ox, I get back double. The same law applies whether it's in my possession or I lend it to someone else. However, if the thief is not caught, then the owner of the house shall appear before the judges to determine whether he laid his hands on his neighbor's property. For every breach of trust, that is actually a legal term to this day, again, based in Western law, or Western law based in this, for every breach of trust, whether it is for an ox, for donkey, for sheep, for clothing, or for any lost thing about which one says, this is it, the case of both parties shall come before the judges. He whom the judge condemns shall pay double to his neighbor. So, in other words, let me make sure. Yeah, okay, I thought that was the conclusion of this segment. So, in other words, the law is also protecting the person from a neighbor that does not have good intentions, that would breach the trust given to them. So in other words, well, I don't have a truck, but if I did and someone said, hey, Aaron, I'm getting ready to move, can I borrow your truck? And I say, sure, here are the keys, please fill it up when you're done. And they take my truck, and then I get a phone call later that day. Hey, Aaron, man, somebody stole your truck. And then it turns out that that person sold my truck and collected the money. Well, that's where we go to the judges, so that the judges can determine, was that person involved? Did they breach my trust? Or was it out of their control and someone else stole it, and therefore the thief would be ultimately responsible? Now, of course, that person, if they were innocent, the neighbor that I lent my theoretical truck to, of course, they'd feel horrible, but the thief is the one that would be responsible ultimately. But if the thief is not caught, how do we know whether or not that person is actually trustworthy? That's where it goes to the judges. In the modern day, the court system, over which a judge presides. All right, verse 10. If a man gives his neighbor a donkey, an ox, a sheep, or any animal to keep for him, and it dies or is hurt or is driven away while no one is looking. So again, the property here, the animal, the property is damaged. Well, if I'm letting someone borrow my truck, I'm trusting that they're going to take care of my truck, right? They bring it back and it's got all kinds of body damage, the engine's knocking, and I have 3 flat tires. I trusted you with my property and now you're returning it damaged. Or maybe they just blew the thing up and it's in a ball of fire. Or, hey man, the analogy kind of breaks down here. The truck ran away, doesn't really work. Although in the days of the automated vehicles, autonomous driving vehicles, that might be a thing. One of my favorite memes, I need to do a meme review again sometime soon. One of my favorite memes is in the days of autonomous driving, country songs will now include "My Truck Ran Away." You're welcome for that. But anyway, if a man gives his neighbor a donkey, an ox, a sheep, or any animal to keep for him, and it dies or is hurt or is driven away while no one's looking. In other words, they didn't care for it to keep it safe, whether that be from running away, etc., etc. An oath before the Lord shall be made by the 2 of them that he has not laid hands on his neighbor's property, and its owner shall accept it, and he shall not make restitution. But if it is actually stolen from him, he shall make restitution to its owner. If it is torn to pieces, let him bring it as evidence. He shall not make restitution for what has been torn to pieces. So maybe a better analogy in the era of 2020, 21, 22, 23, I lend someone my truck and a group of, how do I want to word this? I hate that we have to censor ourselves so much. Okay, let me word it this way. Someone borrows my truck and a group of mostly peaceful protesters destroys my truck. The person that I lent it to would not be responsible because a crowd of vandals and rioters could have come through my neighborhood or that neighborhood or anywhere for that matter. It was not that person's action that caused it. So that is what verse really kind of 10 through 13 is getting at, but especially the 11 through 13. An oath before the Lord shall be made that it was not the neighbor who did the damaging, is the Aaron paraphrase. And evidence needs to be provided. Hey, Aaron, I'm sorry your truck got destroyed. A group of people rioting came through, and, if you can stomach it, I've got security footage. That's a modern example of how this would be fleshed out. And that would be the case in a legal situation. Verses 14 and 15, wrapping it up for today. If a man borrows anything from his neighbor and it is injured or dies while its owner is not with it, he shall make full restitution. So in other words, my first example of the truck where, the engine's knocking or blown or it's in a ball of fire and it wasn't rioters coming through, then the person that borrowed it would be responsible because in this case, clearly they damaged it, so therefore they would be responsible. So if a man borrows anything from his neighbor and it is injured or dies while its owner is not with it, he shall make full restitution. If its owner is with it, in other words, if I'm standing right there and the person, backs another truck up into my truck and I don't say anything, well, then that's on me. If its owner is with it, he shall not make restitution. If it is hired, it came for its hire. So, hope all that makes sense. I hope you enjoy me struggling trying to figure out how to deal with social media and touchy subjects. It is okay to laugh. Let me know your thoughts in the comments as always. With that said, guys, we're going to wrap it up today. Hey, make sure and hit that like button, hit subscribe, turn that bell notification to all so you don't miss any future videos. Check out my video, how to support your favorite YouTube channel, and show us some love. And if you're watching on another platform, do whatever the equivalent is on that platform. All right, guys, thank you very much, and God bless.